Hello and welcome to another wonderful episode of The Best Games, period. I'm your host, Jack Gardner, and with me this week is Daniel Jones. Jeremy has to do adult things, like be responsible at work or something, so he's not here tonight. But, how are you doing, Daniel?
I'm doing alright.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You just spent an hour yelling at me about hard drive space, so... Yeah.
Friggin' hard drive. Friggin' PCs. This is why nobody plays games on PCs.
Good joke. Huh. But this week, it's our 61st episode. We made it! We did it, everyone! 61 episodes! Woo! Celebration! 61. The big 6-1, as everyone says. It's the big number everyone's looking forward to.
Are they, though?
The 61. It's like that Beatles song. Will you still need me? Will you still feed me when I'm 61? Yeah.
That's the Rolling Stones version.
It's the big number. And this week we're celebrating that big number by talking about a, Would you consider this game well loved, or would you consider it kind of overlooked, I suppose?
Man, I don't even know, because I think that I guess it's kind of a cult. It has a cult following to it, but
we're talking about Shadow Complex, by the way.
Yeah, we're talking about Shadow Complex here, but I don't know. It's got a weird following. Some people love it. I mean, have very fond memories of it, but it also didn't really sell that well. Not well enough to warrant a sequel, anyway.
Well enough to warrant a remaster, though.
Yeah. Yup. That Sleeping Dogs also got a remaster.
True.
Look how that turned out.
Well, so this week we're talking about Shadow Complex, and it's a smaller kind of indie game. Came out in 2009. Was it? I believe an Xbox Live exclusive for a while.
It never came to PS3.
Yeah.
The remaster came to PS4, but
right.
But the original never released on PS3. I think it came out on PC, but I'm not sure. It was
it eventually came out on PC.
Okay.
Yeah.
It was an Xbox Live Summer of Arcade game.
Yep.
In 2009. And yeah, I mean it was a pretty neat game, especially back in the day. But before we get into that, Jack.
Oh, polls.
We should mention our polls.
Yes.
We got big polls. Now, so the poll last week was for Brothers: A Tale of Two Sons. And Jack, did you see the poll?
I saw at least the Facebook one, and I gotta say I am incredibly shocked at how close it was. I didn't realize that there were so many people out there who absolutely despised the controls, and there were even some people out there who despised the storytelling.
Everything
Brothers,
about that
which
game.
I don't get that at all. Like,
yeah.
That's like, I hate this movie because it uses a camera to record images. Like, it was pretty, like, the storytelling is incredibly solid in Brothers. Like, it's one of the finest meldings of storytelling and mechanics that I've seen in games. But what were the actual final results of the poll? Because I didn't see that.
Final results were, drumroll please, the no's have it, 35 to 27.
What?
35 no's, 27 yeses. Which, come on. People are, 27 of you know what you're talking about. 2 of which are Jack and I. But 25 of you know what you're talking about. And 35 should be ashamed of yourselves.
Well, that was the Facebook poll, right? Was that?
Yeah, I didn't actually do a Twitter poll today. I forgot.
You're killing me, Smalls.
But here's...
What do we do in a situation like this?
It's...
Do we just...
The Facebook poll has it, and it's a no.
Does that...
It's a no.
Do we get, like, double votes because we're the hosts?
I don't know. We don't actually keep a running tally. That's the fun of the show, is that we're not actually official.
Shh! You're giving away the magic behind the scenes.
So how have you been, Jack? What have you been up to this week? Have you been playing anything? Or...
Well, there's a game that I reviewed last year called Stellaris. You can go and read my review over on community.extra-life.org. And it's a fantastic 4X strategy game. And the basic concept is that you are an alien species just starting out into the intergalactic world, and you forge the race of your people. You forge their fate across the galaxy. And it's interesting in that there are tons of random events that can occur. For example, you could encounter a crazy interdimensional alien rift, or you could find a space fortress that has been around for tens of millions of years. You could encounter like all kinds of crazy random stuff throughout this game. And every playthrough is different, which makes it really fun to play. And in this game, I created a race of creatures called the Sneeb. And they're like these... Basically, think of Snuffleupagus from Sesame Street.
Side note, for the longest time, I thought his name was Snuffleupagus. Like, 2 Fs. Because that makes more sense to me than Snuff... See, I can't even say it. Snuffleupagus. Why would there be a P sound in there? Just make a double F sound.
No,
anyway,
that's what I said. Snuffleupagus.
No, but it's Snuffleupagus.
There's a P?
It's a P!
No.
Yes, look
You're
it up.
on crazy pills.
Look it up.
I guess I should believe you because you have a daughter and like you're more of an authority on that, I guess.
Yup.
But
I am.
I'm going to continue saying Snuffleupagus.
Not snuff films. Snuffleupagus. Yep.
Okay.
It is Snuffleupagus. Mr. Snuffleupagus. Anyway, go ahead.
That's like the Berenstain Bears question all over again.
No, it's not a question. It's spelled with a P. There's no question.
You're basically taking the old Ico position again.
I'm not. No, it's literally spelled with a P.
All right. But anyway, I have this snout race of creatures, and they are militant religious zealots who believe in a deity called the Sneed, and they have a penchant for naming everything after themselves or Sneed. And so I have fun playing with them. But the one thing you need to know about Stellaris is that it is an incredibly slow burn. And by slow burn, I mean one game can take like 3 days to get through.
Oh, for God's sake.
Yeah, it is also just like you get into a groove with it and you just like lose track of time. It eats away time like crazy. So that was basically my week. Right there.
All right.
Yeah.
So you just played that game for 3 days straight?
It got a new expansion, and in my free time, that's what I was doing. It was really cool. You can build like ring worlds and Dyson spheres now, which is pretty sweet.
Vacuums?
No, Dyson spheres, the mega structure that builds around an entire sun.
So wait, so you build planets and celestial bodies?
You can do that now with the update, the Utopia update.
I thought you just built like spaceships and stuff.
Well, you were able to do that before, but the new expansion allows you to also build stuff like ring worlds and...
So now you're a god, not just a commander of an army.
Well, it takes a ton of resources to build that stuff. And like in-game time, it can take you a very long time to actually get to the point where you can A, build it, and B, have enough resources to actually build one. It's not like you can snap your fingers and just make one appear.
Right.
Yeah.
So they're saying that in the future, mankind will be able to build planets.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
I don't think that's
a cool future.
Outside the realm. What about you? What have you been up to?
I've been playing a bunch, just a hodgepodge of different things. I played a little bit of 1080 Avalanche on the GameCube.
Ah, the poor man's SSX.
Yeah, see, that's the thing. It is. And I love the original 1080 on the N64. Did I do a honorable mention on that game yet?
You did
I think
not.
I did.
No. You did.
No?
You did the.
I did
the snowboarding game Alto's something.
Right, Alto's Adventure.
Yeah.
Well, I will eventually do either an honorable mention or convince you guys to do a full episode on 1080, because I love it. I think it's an excellent game. It's physics-based snowboarder. It is not about tricks and boost and all that stuff, and it's got the 90s tude to it, but it's also got just really great snowboarding. And so
I like that you use the word tude.
Yeah.
That's great.
And so 1080 Avalanche, I found it for like $6 at a mom and pop near me. And so I picked it up, and $5 actually, and got it, took it home, played around with it a little bit. It's completely missing all the physics. Like, the thing about the original 1080 was you had to be careful how you landed the board, and that was it. Like, you had to be very careful how you balanced on everything and how you landed. Like, when you went over bumps and what do they call them? The big mounds of snow that they put in the middle. Fucking what?
Oh yeah,
I can't remember.
Snow bumps.
No, there's a term for it. But anyway, if you went over those, like, you had to be very careful how you landed and how there was a huge learning curve because of the physics of that game, and it separated that game from every other snowboarding game. And 1080 Avalanche on the GameCube really doesn't have that. It is stunt based. You want to pull off stunts and get a boost so you can go faster. 1080 didn't have that. It had stunts.
You know why that is, though, right?
Yeah, it's because of SSX.
Well,
I understand.
Not even because of SSX, but it's because of Tony Hawk, Pro Skater.
And Tony Hawk, yeah. But 1080 was developed before Tony Hawk, and it just had its own thing. And so the sequel just didn't follow in the footsteps of the original and just completely tried to ape the other popular games at the time, and I'm not enjoying it, and I'm very disappointed. But it was worth $5 just to at least experience it for myself.
Yeah.
And then I played a little bit of F-Zero GX.
That game is hard as balls.
Holy Jesus, it's hard. I couldn't finish higher than 8th in any races.
Yeah. I remember playing that as a kid and being like, man, F-Zero, I've heard a lot of good things about this game. It's probably going to be like the best racing experience I've ever had.
Right?
And then you just get your butt handed to you over and over and over again.
It was ridiculous. I thought I was doing really well, and I finished 8th. Like, good Lord. So, I played a bunch of those. I played Flint Hook. That's a newer game. That game just came out.
I really hope that's not... You know what? I'm not going to make the joke I was making.
Nope, don't do it.
Flint still needs water, guys. just throwing it out there.
Flint Hook is about a space pirate. It's basically Rogue Legacy with, like, cool...
I'm going to guess a hook-like gadget.
Yeah, just like a little rope swing thing that you can...
Grappling hook?
Use to dash around the environment, and it's just like Rogue Legacy. It's fun. I haven't played a lot of it, but it's really feels good to play.
Cool.
It's a lot of fun. And then I played about an hour of What Remains of Edith Finch.
Oh yeah.
Also,
Thoughts on that game?
That's a trip. I don't really want to say more than that, but I'm excited to play more.
It does really seem like a trip.
It doesn't. It seems like just a regular old walking simulator, but trust me, that game goes places. Weird places.
It sounds to me kind of like The Vanishing of Ethan Carter, which I would love to do an episode on that game someday.
I still need to play that game, and I don't know how weird that game gets.
It gets pretty weird. It's pretty weird.
I can almost guarantee you it doesn't get as weird as Edith Finch does.
Who do you know off the top of your head who made that game?
Edith Finch?
Yeah.
Yeah, Giant Sparrow. They made Unfinished Swan.
Okay, yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
So it's kind of structured very much like Unfinished Swan. Like, everybody thinks of the white world that you paint in with the black paint in Unfinished Swan, but that's actually just the beginning of that game. It eventually goes into many different vignettes of different styles of gameplay from that point on, and Edith Finch does the same thing. Like, you're constantly doing something different.
Okay, interesting.
So it's really cool. I will make my recommendation one way or the other after I've finished it. But so far, it's really cool.
Awesome.
That's it. We can move on.
Well, speaking of 2D games where you flip around and such, best transition we've ever done. How about Shadow Complex? How about that game?
How about it?
We played it.
Shadow Complex is a really pretty game.
No, it's not.
No, I mean, but it was. It was at the time.
No.
I think at the time it really was.
No.
Oh, come on.
No. It's
at the time you did not think that
at the
a
time
downloadable game like that could look like that.
At the time the graphics are good. Like I'll say that. The graphics are good. I would not describe it as pretty. Like
sure, you're right.
It has good graphics.
That's true.
But the aesthetic is not appealing at all. Like I'm upset that you started with that point because I wanted to like ease into that a little bit.
I wanted to upset you.
But this game is not attractive looking at all. It came out during the time when it was in vogue to be just realistic, and I say that with air quotes.
It's got the Gears of War thing going on.
Yeah, it was more realistic to be like gritty and dark, and that's kind of what this game was going for. Yeah. And
it's an Unreal Engine game on the Xbox
3.
360.
Yeah. And so the graphics are good, especially for a downloadable game. Like, things look decent, but that doesn't... Like, there's a difference between that and having an appealing aesthetic.
Listen, maybe the remastered version is much better.
I don't think so. But... And I think that the difference between aesthetic and graphics is something that people often confuse or mesh together. But here it comes out in a real stark contrast because I guess we're just going to kind of get into this, but
let's do it.
It's a Metroidvania style side-scrolling game, and what that means is you're running around side-scroller style and exploring a somewhat open world and finding new power-ups and getting stronger and encountering new things. And that kind of game is usually pretty exciting. The problem is by adopting that style and then putting it that style of game and putting it into this kind of aesthetic, which is this dark, gritty, to its credit, well-realized 3D style, and that, at least unconsciously, draws comparisons to games like Super Metroid or Castlevania back in the day, and those are both games that have style oozing out of their pores, on a visual level, on an audio level, and this game doesn't have either of those things. The soundtrack to this game is almost non-existent.
But I don't know what you're talking about. It's got it's got nondescript white protagonist guy.
Played by Nolan North, yes.
Played by Nolan North. I mean, come on, that is style.
But I just mean like the soundtrack to Shadow Complex.
Yeah, the soundtrack is just
nondescript.
Yes.
And you stack the visuals up against something like an old school Castlevania where literally everything is popping with style. Super Metroid was a direct inspiration for Shadow Complex. And just visually in Super Metroid, you have so much color, so much action being conveyed. And, like, part of me was playing through this again and just thinking that if Shadow Complex was remade today today, for indie games, it's more popular to do pixel art style. And there's a reason for that. And that's because pixel art pops. And it has a readily identifiable vibe to it. And action, and you can express a lot more. And this emphasis that we had on realism, I say that in air quotes, is just no longer a huge part of the industry outside of like AAA games. And I think if Shadow Complex was remade today in a style similar to that more directly tried to at least compete or differentiate itself from those older Super Metroid, Castlevania style games, I think it would actually be a stronger game for that. But as it stands, visually, it is not appealing to me at all.
Yeah. No, I actually would agree with you. Like, but I think what it did do right with its visuals, I enjoyed the way that it integrated 3D into the visuals. Like, it wasn't just a 2.5D game that just happened to have like 3D looking character models and environments, but it actually on occasion would put you into what could only be described as a third person 3D shooter type situation, like a turret sequence, or some of like the takedowns that you could do. Mm-hmm. It took advantage of its 2.5D aesthetic, at least enough that I enjoyed that personally.
Was
that
it,
part?
But was it one of the first
agree
games
that
to do that
the overall style is lacking. What?
Was it one of the first games to do that?
Yeah, I would say so. I
can't think of any that came before, but I might just be.
I think other games had tried to do that to varying degrees of success. Like, yeah. I mean, heck, even Pandemonium on the original PlayStation was very 2.5D, and had your character running in and out of the foreground, and so did like Crash Bandicoot, but as far as popping into like a third person type of thing, yeah, I mean, yeah, it was one of the first games to really embrace that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I feel bad coming out of the gate swinging because I honestly.
It's all right. Let's get it out of the way.
I think that this game is incredibly well designed. Like the soundtrack and the visuals aside, I think the actual side-scrolling gameplay and second-to-second experience of playing Shadow Complex is actually really, really solid.
Yeah.
One of the things they did when they were designing it, they actually did it all in paper first. They created the game, and drew out the levels and figured out, okay, well, this is how far you're going to have to run to reach max speed, or this is how far you're going to have to go to jump your max height, and this is how high you can jump normally, and they mapped it all out on paper by hand first and played it that way, which I find, like, I think more games should do that. Like, I think that just helps humans think outside of a computer. That approach to designing a game like this really shows, because it feels really tight and well tested and balanced for the most part.
Yeah.
There are a few frustrating segments in this game, But outside of those, I just want to say I really appreciate how contextual a lot of the things are, and it still manages to work. Stuff like your character actually uses cover in a side scroller.
Yeah.
And you don't need to be holding a button or anything. Your character just does it. Now, granted, that has some downsides in that sometimes the cover mechanic doesn't work properly. And that can be irritating or frustrating. But for the most part, it works really, really well. That kind of sums up a lot of my thoughts on this game. For the most part, it works really, really well. But sometimes it doesn't, and it gets really frustrating. For example, you were talking about like shooting things in the background and stuff like that because it turns into like a third-person game. And while that's true, sometimes that doesn't work 100% like you'd want it to when you're trying to play it. Like,
yeah, it doesn't control as well as it could.
Yeah, like you're trying to aim at something in the background and it's just not locking onto that thing.
Yeah.
And that is those are probably problems that could have been solved with more development time or whatever. But this is the game we have, and it plays pretty fantastically for what we get.
Yeah, and there's always a really good sense of progression. Like, you're always getting some new ability, and that's the key to a Metroidvania type game is you have to give the player new abilities and give them things to do with that ability that are interesting and fun. And Shadow Complex does a really good job at that. You get towards the end, you get the ability to run on water, and that's just awesome. Because earlier in the game, you had to swim across this lake.
While you're getting shot at by a helicopter.
Evading this helicopter, and this time, you just run across it. And that's really rewarding. And, I mean, stuff like that is very well done. And I think it's easy to forget that, like, it's not that easy to make a Metroidvania game work and to make one that's good. There have been many Metroidvania games that have not been very good and that have not worked. Because if you don't give the player interesting things to play around with, abilities and upgrades, and interesting things for them to do with those, and interesting level design in which to utilize them.
You got to give them enough interesting.
Yes, interesting. It's got to be a lot of interesting.
I think you've just said the word interesting more times in the last 30 seconds than you have in your entire life.
I'm a big believer in repetition, all right? Just saying, it's not an easy genre to nail.
No,
and
100%.
They did. I will at least say that they nailed the gameplay and the progression of the Metroidvania style.
Well, yeah. And I think they actually evolved it in a few ways that might not be immediately obvious to a lot of people, but if you have played a Metroid game, you are familiar with going around and curling up into a ball and bombing every last inch of every single space you ever go into to try and find secrets. And this game sidesteps that issue a little bit by providing you with a tool that will actually reveal secrets. And it's the very first item you get. It's the flashlight. And you might be like, well, doesn't that kind of defeat the point? But the interesting thing about Shadow Complex is even though it arms you with that tool, it just saves you time. Instead of forcing a player to spend 2 hours bombing around random locations to try and find those last 2 power-ups, you can just look around and see if there's anything you missed. And the thing is, these items and power-ups are hidden so well that even if you do spend a fair bit of time looking for things, you might miss some of these upgrades, which I think that's pretty smart game design there.
It's bold. not to lead the player to everything.
Well, well, and they did compromise that a little bit because
yes,
it does have kind of a guiding line to your next objective.
Yeah, I pretty much ignored that the entire game, though.
I think this game is actually stronger if you do ignore that.
Yeah.
But I understand that there are some people who really like having that sense of direction.
Yeah.
And might not be the biggest fans of exploring these worlds. So I get it. I think it's a good compromise to have this game give the most it can to different kinds of players. So I get it. I get why they did it. I'm not mad at it. So in my mind, there are two major areas where this game falls short of, or at least gets kind of weird. Like, I think it definitely falls short in the general aesthetic category. But I think things get really weird with the story aspect of it. This game goes places. Let's just say that. I'm trying to sort my thoughts out on this. But the basic premise of this game is that you play as this young man voiced by Nolan North. I can't remember the young man's name, so I'm just going to call him Nolan North. And he met a girl last night at a bar, and they decided to go spelunking. You know, as you do.
As you do.
And they go to this cave system that she explored as a kid, and she goes down there, and like he just loses contact with her. So he starts exploring this cave system, and finds out that she's been kidnapped by this weird organization that has a complex, a shadow complex, if you will, down in this cave system.
They think they're shadows. It's a psychological complex.
And instead of doing the rational thing, which would be to leave the cave and go to the cops and be like, hey, there's like a whole shadow complex down in these caves, he breaks into this heavily armored military compound himself to try and save this girl he met literally hours before. And like, I can buy that up until a point. But he basically almost immediately starts murdering all these people in order to try and save this lady.
Well, hey, when they're shooting at you, you shoot back.
Well, yeah,
it's America.
Well, yeah, but I feel like at a certain point, you go like, I'm going to go get maybe some help with this. And that point is probably when a giant mechanized tank tries to kill you.
I mean, when you can only literally walk in one direction, it's hard to get, you know?
Well, but here's the other thing. The other thing is you can just leave. That's my favorite part about Shadow Complex.
Yeah.
You can literally, after a certain point, just turn around and go back to the car that you came to the caves in and leave. And Nolan North drives off into the sunset by himself, just going, plenty of fish in the sea. It's okay if she's kidnapped.
That's great.
It's
like the beginning of Far Cry 4, where you can just leave.
Yeah, that is exactly it. And I love that because it's the one ending that actually makes sense for this game. Because going forward, you just have to believe, they fell in love instantaneously the night before. Just love at first sight. He's willing to just murder an army of people to get her back. And that's exactly what he does in the most literal sense of the word the most literal sense of the phrase murder an entire army. That's exactly what he does.
Let's talk about the source material, though.
Well, this is the source material. That's the interesting part. So this game was developed by a company called Chair, and they had the people who founded Chair previously worked at a different developer that was basically run into the ground with the development of a rather famous game implosion called Advent Rising.
Have you ever played Advent Rising?
No, but I actually I want to buy it because I've heard some really good things about it. Surprisingly.
Yeah, it's kind of got a little bit of a cult following. I've never played it myself. I always wanted to back in the day.
Well, so basically with Advent Rising, what happened was it had this unique story, and like the premise is that the wider galaxy has this legend about the human race that they're going to come and like unify the galaxy and or whatever. And some of the alien races are like, that's totally awesome, that'd be rad, we want humans to come. And then there are this other alien race is just like, well, we can't have that, so they go around killing all the humans that they can find.
As you do.
Yeah, there's this almost mystical destiny for like one of the last remaining humans, and then like that it goes from there, and that sounds pretty neat. I'm willing to give that a shot. The problem is when it released, it basically had a ton of game-breaking bugs and issues that like corrupted save files and just all kinds of nasty stuff that made it really difficult to play on Xbox.
Yeah, it was like a 2016 game. Or 17.
Minus the ability to patch it, yes.
Yeah.
Those bugs basically sank the game into so much bad press that no one bought it. And you have to keep in mind, this game was built up to be like a trilogy of games on par with Star Wars. Like that was what they were going for.
Yep.
And that throne was eventually taken by the Mass Effect trilogy.
You mean Avatar?
Avatar: The Last Airbender, the greatest movie of all time. While that game famously imploded, those developers went on to found Chair and make Shadow Complex and Infinity Blade.
And they worked once again with Orson Scott Card,
who had also written the story to Advent Rising. Basically, Chair came up with the idea for the IP of Shadow Complex, and they approached Orson Scott Card and were like, "Hey, we worked with you before. You wanna write this game for us?" And Orson Scott Card was like, "Sure, I loved writing that game for you guys." And so he wrote a book called Empire, and that book actually sold really, really well, and actually got a sequel book called, I think it's called Hidden Empire, Shadow Empire.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, Hidden Empire. That's it. Shadow Complex is the bridge between the two books. So Empire precedes Shadow Complex, and you can actually see some of the events from the book happen in the game. Then it proceeds into Hidden Empire. But Shadow Complex is actually the game that inspired both of them, which is pretty unique. Usually it doesn't go that way.
Right.
There's just a lot of weird political subtext to this game that isn't immediately apparent if you've only played the game.
Well, because it's right, which I appreciate about the game.
Right.
But it is weird. You have to keep that political subtext kind of in your mind. If you know it, it's hard not to think about it when you're playing the game.
Yeah. So
which
you might want to actually go and play Shadow Complex. If you haven't, you might want to go play that and then come back and listen to this other part of our podcast. Because it could potentially ruin how you view Shadow Complex.
Yeah. Or it could make you like it more.
That's possible as well.
No judging. So, what is it about? So, what is the premise of that? Of all of that?
So, the premise of Empire is basically envisioning a second civil war in America. Except this time it isn't between North and South, it's between right and left. The idea is that a leftist organization called the Progressive Restoration has gotten together, and somehow they have enough money to secretly create this war machine that can churn out giant mechanized tank robots and helicopters and super soldiers that have super suits, and they are going to launch a plot to kill the president of the United States and the vice president and seize power for themselves. And that's kind of what is going on in the background of Shadow Complex. In fact, Shadow Complex opens up on a scene that involves the assassination of the vice president of the United States. What is going on in Shadow Complex is this guy happens to be main character, Nolan North, happens to be like this Secret Service trained agent who decided he didn't want to be an agent. And he happened to run into this lady who happens to work with the NSA, and she thinks he'll be somehow more suited to bringing down this entire army of dudes than anyone that's actually working at the NSA or CIA or FBI or whatever. And so she brings him down to the cavern system, and with the assumption that he'll basically be able to take on the entire thing himself. And I guess her senses are right, because he manages to do that. Like, the entire game is just him wiping out this entire leftist progressive army. The idea of this game, and knowing it's written by Orson Scott Card.
Have you ever read any of his books?
I've read the Ender's Game book, and I think I read another one of the Ender's Game books a while.
Yeah, there's Ender's Shadow and Xenophobia, or I think it is.
No, that's his ideology.
No, but I think it's a book called Xenophobia. It's the weirdest thing, because it's all about seeing things from the other side of a conflict.
You might be thinking Speaker of the Dead?
No, there's that too. Hold on a sec. I read Speaker of the Dead and Ender's Shadow, and man, I do not like those books.
Really?
Really, I just couldn't get into them. They just felt like Xenocide. Xenocide.
Okay.
Yeah. They just felt like rehashes. I don't know.
Yeah.
But anyway.
I like those books.
I loved Ender's Game. I loved Ender's Game.
Great.
I just didn't like the sequels.
I like aspects of the sequels. I understand where you're coming from, but I like aspects of the sequels that kind of build on the alienness of aliens. Just how aliens, if we did encounter them, wouldn't think like us at all. Because they're alien. They're from a different place that has different values and different like environments and needs and wants and all that kind of stuff. Like,
yeah.
One of the core points of conflict in that's expanded upon in the sequels is that the bugs, the enemy from the first Ender's Game, are incapable. They didn't realize that individuals were a thing that could exist, because they are a hive mind. And so, to them, the existence of just one person and being a singular person that isn't connected with anything else is like unthinkable. We've never encountered anything like this.
Right.
Why would we think that could exist? And that's just such a great example of alienness that I really like, and I wish more science fiction would tackle things like that.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
But the point here being that Orson Scott Card is generally a decent writer, but he has a lot of problems when it comes to a lot of issues.
You mean politically?
Politically, and just like, I don't know a ton about Orson Scott Card, so I don't want to like make any huge value judgments on him. But there were enough people who don't agree with his views or think that his views are toxic to an extent that there was a pretty big boycott of the Ender's Game film, even though plenty of people love Ender's Game.
Yeah.
And he has a history of saying some things that are pretty inflammatory for example, he wrote a speculative essay when Barack Obama was elected president about how Barack Obama was going to make the presidency a permanent office that lasted an entire lifetime, similar to Hitler, and like he went all out.
Man, if only.
Some of the things.
Gosh.
Why don't you just go join the progressive restoration, Daniel?
I am going to. I think it sounds like a really good idea right about now. Anyway. I need to stop listening to Pod Save America because I'm just... It's rubbing off on me. Speaking of which, go listen to Pod Save America if you like freedom.
No pod can save you now. Except ours. Listen to our podcast. The one true podcast. But knowing all of that history, like, for example, he also opposed gay marriage quite a bit, did not have many kind words to say about the LGBTQ community.
Right.
Yeah, the essay he wrote in particular used some really racially charged language about young unemployed thugs that Barack Obama was going to employ as a national police force, a la the Hitler Youth. So yeah, that's kind of... He has a history of making some pretty problematic statements, despite his skills as a writer. The sequel to Empire, Hidden Empire, well, that book takes place in Africa, and it's about the main character from the first book being sent to guard scientists that are researching a plague after the president of the United States quarantines all of Africa because there's a gigantic virus going on that is killing, I guess, all the people in Africa. Uh-huh. And so the entire continent is quarantined by the United States. They're just going to try and figure out how to make a vaccine, or they're going to let it burn itself out.
Right. Which
just means kill everyone until it can't kill any more people. And that book has some problematic things in it too. Which, yeah. But a lot of that can be divorced from Shadow Complex itself, which really is just you're killing a bunch of bad dudes who have Metal Gear style weapons. The only thing that's kind of weird is that they're supposedly a progressive movement, and it's hard to imagine you understand. I'm having a lot of time talking about this. Like, it's just hard for me to imagine that as an actual thing and basis for a game. Like, even as revisionist history goes, or like, not revisionist history, alternate history, I guess, science fiction goes. Like, it's a bit of a stretch.
Listen.
I'm sure if Jeremy was on, he would be vehemently disagreeing with me that it's a stretch.
No, but here's the thing. Like, would we be batting an eye if the enemies in the game were overtly... And the thing is, this is all in background text. None of this is actually in the game. But...
Yeah. Well, not much of it.
Not much of it, anyway. But would we be batting an eye if they were right-wing, alt-right neo-Nazis?
Probably not.
I guess what I mean is there's extremes on both sides.
There is, but like not in the progressive left movement.
Right.
Like that you'd have to go full on communist.
I guess I just mean philosophically it is possible to have an extreme view, an extreme progressive view.
Well, yes, philosophically it is possible to have a view that is that extreme on the left side of things where you'd be willing to kill for it. The only problem is that's so far divorced from the reality that we live in.
Yeah.
that
Yep.
like it's not really a thing. Editor's note, I am talking exclusively about America. I am aware that historically there are violent leftist movements that have existed in the world. I just don't mean in America. In the real world, the people who are pushing for more military spending and more like access to military hardware aren't the people on the far left. Oftentimes the people who are pushing for more peaceful methods of state force or foreign policy aren't necessarily the people on... It's dangerous to make generalizations. Yes. I understand that there are exceptions. But in general, this view of the world is just so wholly divorced from reality that it's hard for me, once I knew the backstory, to just be like, this is a bit much.
Yeah.
Especially because the style of the game explicitly is trying to invite us to take it on a more realistic level. Like, if this was something, like, on par with, like, Broforce in terms of tone or something,
yeah,
like, I might be able to buy it a little bit more. Oh, yeah, bro, we gotta kill those commie pig dogs. Or, like, something like that. Like, I could get behind that.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is, but I think it has to do with, like, the visual tone and the just, like, jingoistic, yeah, let's kill them all, main character man. I'm being very incoherent with this episode. I apologize.
It's a hard thing to talk about. It's all right. I think we should move on. But I think
I'm trying to figure out how to move on from this.
I get what you're saying. So
yeah, you're finding it hard too. You're finding it hard too.
Yeah. I'm honestly trying to find other things to talk about with Shadow Complex. And that's one of the problems with the game, is that, like, it does the Metroidvania thing really well, and it kind of came at a time when,
there weren't a ton of those.
What? Yeah.
There weren't a ton of those types of games floating around.
Exactly. Like, it came before the big wave of them, that kind of hit a couple of years later.
Well, on the cusp of, like, the rise of indie games.
Yeah, definitely. It was an early Xbox Live game. You know, it was back at the height of Summer of Arcade and right at the beginning of it, kind of. So it was innovative at the time. It was just unique, and it was something different, and it showed that those kind of games could make an impact and could kind of sit right alongside the Gears of Wars and Halos of the world, and in that they didn't all have to be, you know, Braid. And nothing against Braid, but they don't all have to be like that. You can appeal to, like, one of the things that I always notice whenever I talk to casual gamers, they talk about the big AAA games, but if I ever mention, like, a downloadable game to them that they should check out, like, never. It's not even, like, a thought in their head that they should go on to the PlayStation Marketplace and look at those kind of games. That's just not a thing that still, even 2017. So it would be nice even still to see more games like that kind of appeal to, I don't know how to say this better, but like the dude bro casual audience.
Right, I was going to say, this is a very dude bro game that a lot of people can get behind, because it doesn't, like, a lot of the stuff we just talked about is in the background, or, like, not really shown in the light that Orson Scott Card wrote it in. And, like, it has plenty of action, it has exploration, it has, you know, while it might not be the best storyline in the history of games, it has one that is presented well enough to kind of lead the player through and give motivation, and then the gameplay is really solid. And so you have just a really that's a good mix for a downloadable game that can appeal to people who are outside the artsy fartsy indie game world. You know? Yeah, I get what you're saying.
Yeah, you get me.
I get you, bro.
So, what it is Shadow Complex the best game, period, to you,
No.
Jack? Yeah.
No. Yeah. It is a very good, very solid game that definitely has a lot of really great elements to it. I love the contextual takedowns that you can do. Like, if you manage to sneak up behind someone, you can do a sneak attack, and those are really fun. It really shows off the 3D nature of the graphics. There are lots of really cool things to like about this game. But there are also a lot of things that I think hold it back from being as good as it really could be. I would love to see Chair take on, if not a sequel to this, something like this again.
Right.
Because they never have. After this, they went on to make Infinity Blade 1, 2, and 3.
And they just kept doing that.
And then what did they make after that?
The
they
remaster?
made one more thing.
Maybe?
What?
The remaster?
I thought you said the Meat Master. I was like, nah, that's not a thing. They made a game called Spy Jinx.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know anything about it. I didn't even remember that it really came out.
Me neither.
I don't know. Maybe check that out if it's
sure.
if it's worthwhile.
Why not?
Also, interesting to note, this company is very well connected to writers. Brandon Sanderson wrote their Infinity Blade adaptation. I might have to go check that out. I haven't read it, but I like Brandon Sanderson, so he's a good fantasy author.
All right. What else has Brandon Sanderson written?
He wrote a book called Mistborn, which is really, really good. And it started a whole series of books that are also pretty great. But Mistborn is definitely the best one so far.
All right.
It's about an empire at the end of time that is ruled by an immortal god emperor. Just go read the book. I've explained too much fiction today.
You really have.
Podcast.
That's
no one needs to know. Oof. All you need to know is that Mistborn is good, and you should probably go read it because it's great.
Cool.
Yeah. What about you?
I went into this episode thinking that I could go either way. I really, really like Shadow Complex. I enjoy this game a lot.
There's a lot to really like about this game. I don't want anyone to take away that I don't think this is a good game or don't think it's worth your time.
Yeah, I feel like we've just kind of crapped on it much of the episode, but that's one of the things about it is that other than there's just not a lot to really love about it other than the cool metroidvania structure, which, is not as novel as it was in 2009, and the mix of like the 2.5D stuff going on. But other than that, it's a very blah game, and it's hard for me to say that it's the best game, period. It's a really good game, period. Comma, but
you say that right after saying it's a really blah game.
Well, no, I mean
the whiplash you're giving our listeners is crazy.
You're right. It's a blah. It's blah in that like the style, and you're right.
The presentation.
With the style. But I don't know. I don't sit here and think about like moments from that game. Nothing really sticks with me when I think about Shadow Complex. I don't find myself wanting to go back and play Shadow Complex. I would enjoy a sequel to it. Mm-hmm. I would like that, but I don't sit here and want to go back and replay it.
I get what you mean. When I think back on my time with Shadow Complex, I don't remember a ton of standout moments. Like maybe the part where you're swimming under the lake and the helicopter is shooting Gatling guns at you. That was pretty sweet. But you're right. In general, I don't have highlight moments in my head. What I have is a vague sensation that it was a very satisfying experience.
Yeah.
And that's what stuck with me. Not really any specific moments or even like life lessons that the game taught me. Like, it didn't leave me a better person or anything for having played it. And there are genuinely some games I could say that about.
Yeah, such as Brothers.
Like Brothers or that Dragon Cancer, a game that we will definitely talk about on this podcast at some point.
Yep.
Yeah, it's a highly satisfying game, but it is not a game that delivers on everything you could want out of a game like this. It is a very good representation of what games like this did back in the day. If anything, it makes me want to go back and play Super Metroid again.
Yeah, exactly. It does. I have Super Metroid literally sitting in my SNES 2 feet from me, and I'm like, how tired am I? Because I could go play that right now.
So it's a no from you, or are you on the fence? Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
It's not a best game, period.
Okay.
It's a good game, period.
Yeah, it's a
Comma.
It's
a good game, comma.
Good game, period.
But it's not a best game, period.
All right. And now I think we should read off.
Oh my god, I don't even have energy for this part. Yeah.
Well, that's okay. I'll read it off.
All right, go for
it. We get to the part of the show where we talk about people who might have a slightly different take on what makes a good game good or what makes a game bad. Rarely on this show will you ever hear us talk about a game that is just absolutely terrible. But there are always people who think that the game we're talking about on any given week is literally the worst thing that has ever happened to humanity. And so for that, we turn to Metacritic, the lowest reviews of the lowest. And this week we have username AUC, Auk, I guess you'd pronounce that, Auk, who says, this is from August 20th, 2009. This game is a total rip-off of Metroid and Castlevania, both of which have better gameplay and story. Typical.
He's not wrong.
He's not wrong. Typical M plus the $sign. I think trying to say Microsoft. Ripping off good games and calling it innovation. Not made by Microsoft.
Yeah.
Published maybe on Xbox Live, but not made by Microsoft. Too bad people are too occupied with their red rings of death to try and play this bilge. If this was on PS3, then it would have a better review. But at least 6 points should be taken off for being on the crap box, please fix me. Waste of a game. He was trying to say the Xbox 360, but he said crap box, please fix me.
Huh. That seems like a weird spelling error.
Clever.
Autocorrect, I guess.
He just says that so often. It's autocorrected. I like that.
Listen, he's not completely wrong on some of those points.
I mean, it's interesting just in that, like, Metroidvania is an entire genre.
Yeah.
And genres are just basically born by people, by game devs iterating on older ideas.
Right.
And you know what? This game is a Metroidvania style game. Like, it is in the style of Metroid and Castlevania.
Indeed.
But it does a lot of things that both those games didn't do. And, like, as much as I love Super Metroid, I did hate having to roll around and bomb every single thing to try and figure out where to go next.
Right?
And that's something that this game solves quite expertly with a flashlight.
Yep. What's the next one?
The last one I'm going to read, this is from Shane, August 26th, 2009. 2 out of 10. I am confused. Both Castlevania and Metroid are more engaging, interesting, and more fun to play than this title. They have character, atmosphere, and a fantastic setting. Here we have a generic man on a boring Let's Save America story, which is completely banal. Go play the games mentioned above right after Shadow Complex, and you will see this is nothing. More, and then in the middle of more, there's like an entire URL link that doesn't go anywhere. More than a lazy, boring game made by men too pumped up on testosterone to create a game with a story that does not involve all their well-worn-out tropes. Boom! Wow. Mic drop, Shane. I can't even really disagree with this.
Right.
Both Castlevania and Metroid are more engaging, but that's also why they have an entire genre named after both of them. So I feel like that I can let that part slide. But having the part about a boring protagonist on a Let's Save America story is 100% accurate. This story is like the modern equivalent of Are You a Bad Enough Dude to Save the President? I wouldn't go so far as like saying it's a lazy or boring game. I would say that the presentation is dull, but it's not lazy or boring. Like, a lot of effort clearly went into this game. And it pays off when you're playing it in the minute-to-minute experience of just running around exploring and getting into gunfights and stuff. Like, there's a lot of interesting things to like in Shadow Complex.
Yeah.
It's just kind of mired by this art style, and
it's a very blah game.
Yeah. If anything, it could use more testosterone or more estrogen. Just more of everything. Throw more of everything in there. Throw a cocktail of hormones in there.
Yeah. I mean, there's just the one girl, right? And she doesn't really do much.
Right. She's the Deus Ex Machina at the end with, surprise, I'm an NSA agent, and you are my ploy to take this entire organization down.
Right.
And by the way, you didn't even want to be involved in stuff like this, but I made you. And Nolan North just kind of looks at her and is like, you got me. Then they fly off into the sunset in a helicopter. Spoilers, I guess.
Sorry, Shadow Complex, not a best game, period. We'll put out a poll this week and we'll see how the listeners feel about it.
On Facebook and Twitter.
This week. I could still do the Twitter poll. I just
it won't be the same now, Daniel.
I know, I failed. All right, so every week we post the best game period on community.extra-life.org. Jack, people might be wondering what Extra Life is. Can you expand on that a little bit?
I suppose I could. Extra Life is a fantastic charity where people from all over the United States and Canada get together to play games and raise money for sick kids in hospitals. It's fantastic. Basically, it's like a runathon or walkathon or whatever. You get people, friends, family, strangers to pledge you money. 100% of it goes directly to a hospital of your choice. Children's Miracle Network hospital of your choice. And it's great. You get to raise money by doing something literally everyone loves to do. Literally everyone loves to play games. It doesn't have to be video games. It can be a tabletop. It can be a card game. It can be just your normal outdoor sports game with balls. Like, whatever. Or a hockey puck. You know the kinds of games you like to play. You just like playing games. So, play games and raise money to help sick kids.
Can I play games with your heart?
Don't play games with my heart, Daniel.
Okay.
Don't do it. Don't do it, Daniel. Don't play with my heart.
It's too late.
Anyway, head over to extra-life.org, and there you can find out more. There's some frequently asked questions over there if you are wondering what the heck Extra Life's about. And if you want to get more involved with the community, head over to community.extra-life.org, and you can read some interesting articles or find this very podcast. So, yeah, check it out.
Cool. Jack.
Daniel.
Audience, listeners, thank you all for joining me tonight. Thank you, Jack, for joining me tonight. Thank you for listening to episode 61 of the Best Games Period. You can find the Best Games Period every Monday. You can find it anytime, but new episodes go up every Monday on iTunes, SoundCloud. We post them on Game Informer, Extra Life, Twitter at Best Games Period. We post them on our hosting site, Libsyn. You can listen directly on there as well. Give us a review on iTunes. We would love it. You can also support us on Patreon, patreon.com/bestgamesperiod. $1 a month will get you exclusive extra content that we record that is very fun. It's interesting stuff. Promise. It's not just junk. It's actually stuff that we want people to support us so that we can just give them the extra content, because we're just bursting at the seams. And they're not just extra episodes of the Best Games Period. They're just, some of them are just random discussions that we have about random stuff. So throw us $1 on patreon.com/bestgamesperiod, and you can see what I'm talking about. You can also follow us, like us on Facebook. Phew! You can like us on Facebook, facebook.com/bestgamesperiod. And I believe that's everything. Thank you for listening to episode 61 of the Best Games Period. Until next time, we will see you all on the Flippity Dippity. Someday I'll get better at that.
What? Flipping and dipping?
The whole rundown of everything.
We're getting better at it. 60 episodes in.